Hey guys, Bert here with a new project from Pixel Armory. So I've had people ask me, how do I take really big 3D prints and then slice it up and get it to print out and get it such good quality? By the way, if you're hearing a whole bunch of cracking and loud thudding, there's a monsoon going on outside right now. So I'm sitting in my apartment listening to this and watching it go on outside. Hopefully I don't blow away. So if I continue throughout the video, hopefully everything's great. Anyway, so there's a lot of different places to get 3D models, especially for a lot of Destiny guns that I get. Now, anything that you can use in Destiny, a weapon or armor, you can get from what they call the Destiny STL generator. Now, the Destiny STL generator extracts the 3D meshes from the app that you can get on your phone. And it's very straightforward. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to show you guys how to do it. Now, first things first, though, my 3D printer, my Robo 3D, only has a maximum build height of 210 millimeters. I never build that tall just because the higher you build something, generally you end up having layers shift a little bit and you can get some poor printing. I've never run into that, but just to be on the safe side, I always go down to 200 millimeters for each height whenever I cut something up. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you guys where I go to get a lot of my 3D models for Destiny and how I import them and slice them up and then ultimately 3D print them. So what we're going to do now is we're going to switch to my desktop view here. So I'm going to go ahead and make the For the People Legendary Auto Rifle. So I'm going to type in for the, and here it is, just like that. And we go ahead and hit generate. Now, whenever you import something and generate it, you're going to get two options. One is going to be to have the entire model one solid watertight piece. The second is going to be where all the individual meshes are separate. So this really only applies if you're downloading a piece of armor and you want to break apart the armor to print individual pieces. That's the only time I would really suggest to download them in individual pieces. So if we look here, we've got single and then we've got individual. I'm going to go ahead and hit For the People for just the single file. And we're going to go ahead and hit Netfabb. Now I use Netfabb Basic. It is a free slicer software that I've gotten off the internet. It works very, very well, and after you cut each piece, you can use a repair function to fix each piece. So then you can just go ahead and make sure it's watertight before you print it. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. Now, because I'm using the free version, it always asks me, would you like to update? No, I would not like to pay $300 for the full version because I don't need it. Wait 10 seconds, then you hit later. And do you want these meshes to become separate? No. And here we have the legendary auto rifle For the People. So the model is currently not exactly watertight. You'll have to repair each piece after you slice it, but all in all, there it is. And all the auto rifles I've found actually import with this weird scope that you can get from certain guns in the game. I don't ever use it because I think it's ugly and it's big and it's dumb looking. So I'm going to go ahead and slice that off later on. But first things first, click on the model. It's going to be highlighted green. And down here is your cuts manifest. So you've got everything. Go ahead and hit reset. So you got your Z-axis, your Y-axis, and your X-axis. So what we want to do is we want to go ahead and use our X-axis, go to the very front. Now I know that I can only print something a maximum of 200 millimeters tall. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, the maximum is at 758.97, so I'm just going to turn that into a 5. And right there, I've got a 200 millimeter piece. Go ahead and hit execute cut, and cut, just like that. And then when we go back to the front again, oops, hit X, bring it all the way back up, and then we'll just make that a 300. Now what I'm doing is I'm working in multiples of 200, and that's really the best way that I've always found to do it because it makes everything go together really, really, really nicely. However, if you notice, we're going to end up starting to slice this scope here, and I want to get rid of this thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hit reset. We're going to take our Z-axis here. We're going to bring this all the way up. I'm going to zoom in. Now, as you can see here, the blue, it's touching the top of this rail here, which means it's going to slice off a small piece of that. So we're just going to hit this here, and it's going to give me small increments until, boom, there we go. It's not touching the rail anymore. So we can go ahead and hit execute cut and cut. There we go. Right-click, hit remove. Yes, I want it gone. Boom, there we go. Now we've got the auto rifle in all its glory. This will print out and it won't be a big deal. I'm going to go ahead and just print a pair of like iron sights and slap them on there and it'll look perfect. So here we go. We've got the model. First part is already cut. Now we're going to take and we're going to start slicing more of it. So we're going to go ahead and do a second factor of 200. So we're going to make this 300. Execute cut and cut. And there we go. We've got two pieces. And then for the third piece, we're going to go ahead and hit a factor of 200, which would make this just one. And there we go. Another 200 millimeter section. Execute cut and cut. So now we've got our fourth factor. So what we want to do now is, oddly enough, we're just going, oofta. There's a really big storm going on outside. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to do a negative factor of 800. Now, obviously, if we were to go 800 below this, we're actually going to have then negative, right there, negative 42. And if you look back, it was at 58. Well, opposite of 58, from when you go to a negative, you actually go backwards. Then it'd be negative 42. But if you look here, we're only cutting a small factor of the back of the stock, and we don't necessarily want just a small piece like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make it just a little bit bigger, but I don't want to be catching the lip right there. So we'll go right there, hit execute cut, and cut that. And I'll explain in a moment why I did that once it gets done. All right, so here we go. We have a piece that is 181 millimeters tall, and then we have a piece here that is 240 millimeters tall. Now, the reason I want to do this is for the buttstock, is this is actually going to receive quite a bit of punishment as far as force that's going to be exerted on it. So I want to slice this then in half. So we're going to take our, reset this, we're going to take our x-axis, and we're going to slice it right about there. That way so we're not going across any diagonal or inclines, and then we're going to hit execute cut again, and cut. Now the reason I want to take this is I want to take these two pieces, I want to make these a higher percentage of infill than the rest of it in order to make it more durable. Now we've got two pieces here that, you know, are very similar. However, if you look at this piece, we've got a 230 millimeter height, it says, but technically I would be laying that on 9-degree angle, so it's going to be too big to print on my print bed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click it, hit reset, and then we're going to hit our z-axis, bring it, right up here to the middle, and then we're going to hit execute cut. Now what we're going to do is we're going to separate these two pieces so that it's not as big of a print, because we're printing empty air in here otherwise. Now, this is the part you have to watch out for. If you screw this up, it's going to mess the whole model up. You have to hit only selected parts. You have to hit that. Otherwise, it's going to slice that entire length of the model, and it's going to screw up all your pieces. And then hit execute cut. And there we go. These pieces are now separate. And then we're going to do the same thing here. So hit reset, z-axis. Want to go just above the trigger group. Execute cut, only selected parts, and cut. And give it a moment. And there we go. And then we're going to want to do the last piece. Now for here, I'm just going to cut it right above the Betamax or ammo drum or whatever you want to call it. Right there. I'm going to go ahead and execute cut, only selected parts, and cut. And just like that, we now have a fully ready to print 3D model of a legendary auto rifle from Destiny. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 pieces. Now, the next part you have to do. You have to do it. It's just like selecting only cut the selected parts. You have to do this for each piece. Click on each piece and hit this little cross up here. Now what you want to do is you want to repair it. Now you see where there's this little highlighted piece here? That indicates that the model has been found to not be watertight in this particular area right here. So you're going to want to go ahead and hit automatic repair and hit execute. Now you see how it's green? That means it's repaired it. Apply repair, and this is going to change color now, and there you go. And you're going to want to do this for each piece, and it'll find pieces on each piece that aren't perfectly watertight. Rarely do you find models that aren't already perfect, especially after slicing. But what we'll do is we'll go ahead and hit repair all of them. All right, and we're back. So we're going to keep repairing all these pieces. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and fast forward to the very end of where we end up importing these pieces then and saving them to then put them into our 3D printing program to then generate the G code. All right, 15.04.2. I've found this to work exceptionally well. The newer version is a little bit goofy and I don't like it, so I use the older version because I stick with what works. So here's my basic settings, 300 microns, and, fill density is at 6%. I have found 6% to be more than sufficient. It makes the parts very strong yet very light. 20%, unless you're planning on bludgeoning someone to death with this stuff, you don't need 20%. It's going to waste so much material and so much time. I mean, you will literally double, if not more than double, the amount of material and time you're using if you upgrade or increase the fill density past, I'd say 6%. You go to 20% like a lot of the programs suggest. If you look here, it says, when you highlight this, it says 20%. That's just nuts. The Halo 5 railgun that I made it 20%. The thing is so heavy, I don't even want to carry it. And I feel like if I was to drop it, it would probably break my foot. So I don't use 20%. Just no need for it. So we're going to go ahead here now and hit load. And I've gone ahead and I've already named a lot of these pieces. So we'll go ahead and trigger group. Here we go. So we've got the trigger group. Now the very important part of 3D printing is making sure that a flat area with a lot of surface area, preferably the most surface area, is facing on the build plate. That way so you have the best chance of strong adhesion. So we're going to go ahead and turn it that way. Now I know that this little X, marker here means that is the front left part of my table, my print table. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn this and I will explain why. Now whenever you're 3D printing, your bed is going to move on the y-axis back and forth, and then the print head moves on the x-axis, and then it has the z-axis which is going up and down. So as your print bed is moving back and forth, you're going to have force that's going to be exerted on your 3D print. Having it going in line parallel with the movement and its overall length will give you a lot more strength and better quality through your print. If you were to turn that sideways, you could end up getting layer shift as you get higher into your 3D print. Doing it this way ensures that your 3D printing layers sit evenly on top of each other and you don't have any what we call wobble, because wobble is bad, especially if you've seen it and you've dealt with it, it's bad. So we can go ahead now and we can see that we've got 7.5 hours at 165 grams. Now, there's a few things to know when 3D printing. Know when to use a brim and know when to use a support type and what type of support type to use. Now, because of the amount of surface area this 3D model has, I don't need to use a brim. Now, I will explain to what brim is in here. You click on your view mode and always go to layers and check every single model you print with this before you print it. That way so you know for a fact it's watertight. Otherwise, you're going to possibly have horrible prints and you're going to waste a lot of material and a lot of time. It's going to be very frustrating and you're not going to like it. So, we can see here that the 3D print looks like it's solid from top to bottom. If I was missing a piece, you would see like just a section just totally missing. It would just be thin air. That's not good. So we can see from top to bottom the 3D print's there. And if we scroll all the way down here, we can see there's the 6% infill. 6% infill, that's more than enough. Unless you're really expecting to use this in an action movie or something, 6% is more. If you want to use more than 6%, be my guest. I don't think you really need to. And then if you look around the model, you can see this blue line here. That's the brim. Now, if you're having trouble getting a 3D model to adhere to the bed, brim is a very good choice. And the more layers, the better. And I'll show you how to change that quick. If you go to expert settings, you can change the brim line count to whatever you want. I generally use around 40 if I'm using something that's very narrow and very tall. But for something that's large like this, I have no need to use it. However, because I am 3D printing something that's got an open space here, I am going to use... I guess there's a lot more rain coming down. Oh no, I lied. It's hail. It's hailing outside. Great. I'm sure that's great for my car. So, support type, I'm going to use everywhere. And this means that it's going to 3D print supports on the actual model itself. These are very easily removed, and then you can just take a little bit of sandpaper to it, and a lot of the pieces will fly off, and that's no big deal. And then you can end up cleaning it up a little bit, and you can get a really good 3D model out of it. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this and import another piece. This one's a little tricky. As you can see, you've got this big overhanging, arm here, And then you have to decide, okay, well, what piece do I use as the piece that's touching the bottom? Well, that's a tricky piece, and that's actually quite easy to do. So you go ahead and turn it 90 degrees, and I'm going to go ahead and turn this 90 degrees so it's parallel with the movement of the print bed. Right click, center on platform. And then I'm just going to check and see what the material usage in print time is. If you don't want to use as much material, you may find that there is a way that prints with a lot less material and uses a lot less time. And trust me, time and money when 3D printing is something you want to minimize. Believe me, you want to minimize it. All right, so it looks like we got 16 1/4 hours at 346 grams. That's good. And we've got our support type for everywhere. But then let's go ahead and flip it 180 degrees, and let's just see which way works better. And you're looking ultimately for a less print time and less material usage. It shouldn't really matter if you have your printer tuned right. Which way you do it, the support material should be able to work with whatever you're working with. So as long as you've got it tuned correctly and you treat your printer well and be sure to clean it up periodically, you shouldn't have any trouble switching it around. So we've got 16 1/4 at 346. Let's see what the new settings will be. 18 hours at 372. Well, I'm pretty sure that's a definitive answer that the other way worked best. So what you'll then want is just go ahead and switch it back to the other way. Go ahead and check to make sure all the layers are there and that the print is watertight, and then go ahead and hit save and go ahead and 3D print. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and end the video here, and in the next video I'm going to go ahead and show you the pieces that I have printed out for the people, and go through how little bits of tidbits about that, and then the assembly and overall finishing of it. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this instructional video of how to 3D print large items on a small 3D printer. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them. Don't forget to hit that subscribe and favor button. We'd love to hear from people and see that people are taking an interest in our channel. And until next time, I'm Bert from Pixel Armory. Take care, guys.